Hello, I'm Maricar Velasco and you're watching Eagle News International. On tonight's headlines. Russian forces shell another Ukraine city, Kyiv, a fortress. 2 Ukrainian soldiers killed in Russian strikes on the Lutsk military airport in northwest Ukraine. COVID cases in China have soared past the 1,000 mark this week for the first time since the early days of the pandemic in 2020. And the Apollo missions to the moon brought a total of 2,196 rock samples to Earth. Russian troops edged closer to Kyiv on Friday as officials said the Ukrainian capital was being transformed into a fortress, and President Volodymyr Zelensky accused Moscow of again targeting humanitarian corridors. Hundreds of thousands of civilians remain holed up in Ukrainian cities, including besieged Mariupol, under a Russian bombing campaign after the first talks between Moscow and Kyiv's top diplomats ended without any progress. The Ukrainian military, in a statement, warned the enemy is trying to eliminate the defenses of the Ukrainian forces around regions to the west and northwest of the capital to block Kyiv. The statement added they can't rule out a movement of the enemy to the east towards Brovary. In the capital, Mayor Vitaly Klitschko said half the population had fled, adding that the city has been transformed into a fortress and every street, every building, every checkpoint has been fortified. Russian forces are currently encircling at least 4 major Ukrainian cities, and armored vehicles have rolled up to Kyiv's northeastern edge, where suburbs including Irpin and Bucha have endured days of heavy bombardment. Ukrainian soldiers there described fierce fighting for control of the main highway leading into the capital, and AFP reporters saw missile strikes in Velika, Demirka, just outside Kyiv's city limits. Britain's defense ministry said in an intelligence update that Russian forces are committing an increased number of their deployed forces to encircle key cities. A statement tweeted by the ministry said this will reduce the number of forces available to continue their advance and will further slow Russian progress.
Утром 11 марта высокоточным оружием большой дальности нанесен удар по объектам военной инфраструктуры Украины. Выведены из строя военные аэродромы в Луцке и Ивано-Франковске.
Meanwhile, 2 Ukrainian soldiers were killed on Friday in Russian strikes on the Lutsk military airport in northwest Ukraine, local authorities said. Regional administration official Yuri Pohylyako said 4 rockets were fired by a Russian army bomber on the Lutsk military airfield. Earlier, Russian Defense Ministry spokesman Igor Konachenkov announced that Lutsk and Ivano-Frankivsk military airfields had been put out of action. Lutsk Mayor Ihor Polishchuk wrote on Facebook, "Explosions at the airport side. Everyone to shelters. Do not publish any photos, addresses, or coordinates." Meanwhile, Russian strikes in Dnipro in central Ukraine on Friday killed at least 1 civilian, according to local emergency services. Early on Friday, there were 3 airstrikes on the city, namely hitting a kindergarten, an apartment building, and a 2-story shoe factory, starting a fire where 1 person died, according to the statement. Russian President Vladimir Putin on Friday backed plans to allow volunteers, including from abroad, to fight in Ukraine, where he has sent thousands of Russian troops in what he calls a special military operation. During a televised Security Council meeting, Putin told Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu that if he sees that there are people who want on a voluntary basis to help East Ukraine separatists, then he needs to meet them halfway and help them move to combat zones.
Если вы видите, что есть люди, которые хотят на добровольной основе, тем более не за деньги, приехать и оказать помощь людям, проживающим на Донбассе, ну что же, надо пойти им навстречу и помочь им перебраться в зону боевых действий.
According to Shoigu, more than 16,000 volunteers, mostly from the Middle East, have appealed to join the military action. As for the supply of arms, especially Western-made, which ended up in the hands of the Russian army, Putin said he supports the possibility of transferring them to the military units of DNR and LNR, referring to the breakaway Donetsk and Lugansk People's Republics in Ukraine's east. Putin also ordered the Shoigu prepare a separate report on strengthening Russia's western borders in connection to the actions that NATO countries are taking in this direction. Meanwhile, the Kremlin said Friday that fighters from Syria and the Middle East would be allowed to fight for Russia in Ukraine after President Vladimir Putin backed a plan to send volunteers to battle there. Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov told reporters that Russia's defense minister had said that most of those who want and who ask to fight are citizens of the Middle East countries and Syrians. Russia was a key partner to Syrian President Bashar al-Assad when war broke out, rallying to his side in the conflict in 2015 and turning the tide of the fighting in the regime's favor. Peskov said the decision to send volunteer fighters to Ukraine was acceptable, claiming that the United States was backing measures to send mercenaries to fight alongside Kiev's army in Ukraine. Russia launched a massive military operation in Ukraine late last month, spurring an exodus of refugees in Europe and allegations of war crimes. Peskov told journalists if the West is so enthusiastic about the arrival of mercenaries, then they also have volunteers who want to participate. Putin backed plans to allow volunteers, including from abroad, to fight in Ukraine earlier Friday, and Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu said more than 16,000 mostly Middle Eastern volunteers had appealed to join the military action. Ukraine has announced the creation of foreign volunteer contingents to be integrated into its armed forces to fight Russian forces on its territory. NATO must not allow Russia's invasion of Ukraine to spill over into a war between the alliance and Moscow, its chief Jens Stoltenberg said Friday, again ruling out a no-fly zone. The NATO Secretary General said they have a responsibility to prevent this conflict from escalating beyond Ukraine's borders to becoming a full-fledged war between Russia and NATO. He warned that a no-fly zone over Ukraine would most likely lead to a full war between NATO and Russia, causing so much more suffering, much more death and destruction. He added that the training of tens of thousands of Ukrainian troops by NATO member states in recent years, as well as the supply of military equipment, had proved extremely important for Ukraine's forces in the fight against invading Russian forces. And the most important thing is that the President Vladimir Putin should end this senseless war. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky Thursday said around 100,000 people had evacuated the country's cities in 2 days, but accused Russian forces of targeting a humanitarian corridor in the city of Mariupol. Zelensky said he decided to send a convoy of trucks into the besieged port city with food, water, and medicine. But the occupiers launched a tank attack exactly where this corridor was supposed to be, he said in a video statement, describing it as outright terror. The Ukrainian leader said that of the 100,000 people who had been able to leave other Ukrainian cities via humanitarian corridors over the past 2 days, some 40,000 had fled on Thursday alone. Ukraine has accused Russia of carrying out an airstrike on Wednesday on a maternity hospital in Mariupol, a strategic port on the Azov Sea, killing 3 people, including a young girl. Moscow Thursday promised to open humanitarian corridors every day to allow Ukrainians to flee onto its soil, but Kyiv has previously rejected evacuation routes leading into Russia.
З урахуванням роботи гуманітарних коридорів у попередні 2 дні ми вже евакуювали близько 100 тисяч людей. Але Маріуполь, Волноваха залишаються повністю заблокованими. Хоча ми зробили усе, що було потрібно для роботи гуманітарного коридору. Російські війська так і не припинили вогонь. Попри це, я вирішив все одно направити колону вантажівок для Маріуполя. З їжею, водою, ліками. Я вдячний, але окупанти розпочали танкову атаку саме там, де мав бути цей коридор.
In other news, the European Union is proposing to double financing for military aid to Ukraine by an additional 500 million euros to help Kiev's forces battling Russia's invasion, the bloc's foreign policy chief said Friday. Joseph Borrell said he was certain EU leaders meeting in France would agree to expand the spending package that has seen the bloc fund weapons going to Ukraine. The EU last month broke a long-standing taboo by agreeing to pay for arms deliveries to Ukraine after Russian President Vladimir Putin launched the invasion of his pro-Western neighbor. The move was part of a broad push by Ukraine's allies to send weapons in the face of desperate pleas from Kyiv for more support to help it fight off the Kremlin's advancing forces. Officials said the new tranche of money would go towards reimbursing EU nations that were unilaterally sending arms requested by Kyiv. Ukraine has been pushing for its allies to supply air defense systems to help prevent Russian bombings after the West rebuffed calls to impose a no-fly zone. 29 more Filipinos evacuated from Ukraine arrived in the Philippines on Thursday, March 10. According to the Department of Foreign Affairs, the 29 seafarers arrived from Bucharest in Romania. The department said the 29 seafarers consists of 20 crew members of MV Global Aglaya, 2 seafarers of MV Joseph Schultz, and 7 seafarers from MV Star Helena. They exited Ukraine via Moldova with assistance from the Philippine Honorary Consulate in Chisinau and the Philippine Embassy in Budapest. The department said the department expects more seafarers to arrive in the country in the next few days through its evacuation and repatriation programs. With their arrival, the DFA said the total number of repatriated Filipino seafarers from Ukraine was now at 55. In other news, 2.5 million people have fled Ukraine since Russia invaded, and another 2 million have been internally displaced by the war, the United Nations said Friday. The UN Refugee Agency's chief, Filippo Grandi, blamed the mass displacement on what he called a senseless war that began on February 24. The number of refugees from Ukraine tragically has reached today 2.5 million, according to the UNHCR chief Grandi. They also estimate that about 2 million people are displaced inside Ukraine, millions forced to leave their homes by this senseless war. Paul Dillon, spokesman for the UN's International Organization for Migration, said the 2.5 million people who had fled Ukraine included 116,000 nationals from other countries. Before Russia invaded, more than 37 million people lived in Ukrainian territory under the control of the central government in Kyiv. More than half of those who have fled have gone to Poland. More news when Eagle News International returns.
Mr. Bawal, may ibis ka, oh. Asan? It's a prank! Okay lang manakot. Pero kung mananakot ka para sa boto, bawal yan!
Ayon sa Omnibus Election Code, threats, intimidation, terrorism, use of fraudulent device or other forms of coercion is an election offense.
Sino kausap mo? Makaalis na nga, sa iba na lang mananakot. Mr. Pwede! Mr. Pwede! May malaking ibis sa likod mo! Nox! Babawi ka pa, ha? Di mo ako maiisahan! Ako si Mr. Bawal na nagpapaalala sa inyo na ang pananakot para sa boto. Ibis! Uy! Bawal yan!
A public service message of Net25 for Mata ng Halalan 2022. Matatag, matapang, matapat.
Mula noon hanggang ngayon, gabay natin ang MTRCB ratings sa matalino at responsableng panonood. Sa tamang pagsunod sa MTRCB ratings, ginagawa nating ligtas at makabuluhan ang panonood ng bawat miyembro ng pamilyang Pilipino. Lumipas man ang panahon, hanggang may pamilyang Pilipino, andyan ang MTRCB.
Karapatan natin lahat na iboto ang karapat-dapat! Tama! Lahat ng Pilipino pwedeng bumoto!
Kung rehistrado ka, ang lahat ng Pilipinong rehistrado lamang ang maaaring bumoto. 1 taon ang ibinibigay ng Commission on Elections para magparehistro ang mga Pilipinong boboto sa darating na eleksyon. Kailangan gawin ito para maiwasan ang tinatawag na flying voters. Teka, lahat ba kayo nagparehistro na?
Opo! Rehistrado na kami lahat!
Bakit tahimik ka? Hindi ka nakapagrehistro, no?
Nakakalimutan ko.
Hindi ka pwedeng bumoto. Mabuti pa, bumili ka na lang ng balot.
Pagka kami pa bumili ng balot, pwede na kami bumoto.
Hindi, pero mabubusog ka. Para sa karagdagang kaalaman, makipag-ugnayan lang sa pinakamalapit na barangay o bisitahin ang COMELEC website.
A public service message of Net25 for Mata ng Halalan 2022. Matatag, matapang, matapat.
Alam namin ang iyong pagsisikap. Dama namin ang iyong mga sakripisyo. Kita namin ang pagharap mo sa bawat pagsubok. Kaya sa kabila ng mga hamon ng buhay, nandito kami para umalalay. Kasi katulad mo, gusto rin namin ang magandang bukas para sa kanya. Hatid namin ang dekalidad na edukasyon at makabagong pasilidad sa abot kayang halaga. Kaya huwag ka na mangamba. Sasamahan ka namin tuparin ang mga pangarap niya. Maaasahan mong sulit dito ang mga pinagsikapan mo. Sa aming mga makabagong pasilidad at sistema ng edukasyon. Mailalabas natin ang aking talino at mga kakayahan niya. Kahit sa munting halaga, makakasiguro ka na makakasabay siya sa mabilis na pag-ikot ng mundo. Sa New Era, karamay mo kami sa bawat hamon. Kaagapay mo kami sa bawat hakbang. Kasama mo kami sa bawat ngiti at tagumpay.
Welcome back. Over to China. China reported its highest daily total of coronavirus cases in 2 years on Friday as authorities in Shanghai and other major cities stepped up targeted lockdowns and testing to halt the highly transmissible Omicron variant. With public fatigue over China's strict zero-COVID approach rising fast, authorities are now avoiding the implementation of mass city-wide lockdowns seen previously in favor of a more focused response. But that has given rise to online images in Shanghai spotlighting students and teachers confined for up to 48 hours on campuses and patrons locked in restaurants or malls until they are retested as authorities pounce on reported close contact situations. COVID cases have soared past the 1,000 mark this week for the first time since the pandemic's early days, from less than 100 just 3 weeks ago. There were 1,369 cases across more than a dozen provinces, according to the latest daily official count released on Friday. Staff at the Shanghai American School told AFP that health personnel visited the campus on Friday to conduct COVID tests on teachers and students, though they were not confined. Similar situations have been reported at other schools in Shanghai over the past week. Shanghai Mayor Gong Zhang indicated the city's more focused approach in a social media post on Thursday. In connection to this, a northeastern Chinese city of 9 million people was ordered to lock down on Friday as authorities scramble to halt a fresh COVID-19 break that has pushed nationwide case counts to their highest in 2 years. Changchun, the capital of Jilin province and an important industrial base, has ordered residents to work from home. One person will be allowed out every 2 days to buy daily necessities and said it would institute mass testing. After the highly transmissible Omicron variant broke through China's defenses, COVID cases across the country soared past the 1,000 mark this week for the first time since the pandemic's early days in 2020, from less than 100 just 3 weeks ago. There were 1,369 cases across more than a dozen provinces, according to the latest daily official count released earlier Friday. Also on Friday, Shanghai ordered its schools to close and shift to online instruction, but the aggressive approach has caused pandemic fatigue in China. Meanwhile, foreign travelers and returning Filipinos are now allowed to present a negative result of laboratory-based antigen tests upon their arrival in the Philippines, Malacanang said Friday. The Interagency Task Force for the Management of Emerging Infectious Diseases made the latest move amid the eased coronavirus disease 2019 restrictions in the country. Prior to this, international passengers entering the Philippines can only present a negative result of reverse transcription polymerase chain reaction or RT-PCR test. Previously, they just have to show a negative RT-PCR test taken within 48 hours. Now it is either of the two, RT-PCR or antigen. Deputy Presidential Spokesperson and Communications Undersecretary Michael Christian Ablan said in an online presser. Under IATF EID Resolution 160-A issued Thursday, fully vaccinated Filipino nationals have the option to present either a negative result of RT-PCR test taken within 48 hours or a negative result of a laboratory-based antigen test taken within 24 hours prior to the date and time of their departure from the country of origin. Fully vaccinated individuals are no longer required to observe mandatory facility-based quarantine, but need to self-monitor for any sign or symptom for 7 days. The new rule also applies to Filipinos who are unvaccinated and partially vaccinated, as well as those with unverified vaccination status. However, those who are not fully vaccinated are mandated to undergo facility-based quarantine until the release of their negative RT-PCR test taken on their 5th day in the country. They are also required to observe home quarantine for another 9 days. For Filipino nationals who have recovered from COVID-19 but test positive prior to their arrival in the Philippines, they are required to present a positive RT-PCR test result taken not earlier than 10 days but not later than 30 days and a positive RT-PCR test result taken within 48 hours before entering the country. Fully recovered Filipinos returning to the country must also submit a medical certificate issued by a licensed physician to determine if they are asymptomatic or have COVID-19 symptoms. The Philippine government has released 2.5 billion pesos as funds for the fuel subsidy program to help public utility drivers affected by the continuing and increasing oil price hikes due to the escalating tensions between Russia and Ukraine. Around 6,500 pesos will be distributed to the 377,443 beneficiaries in the country, including drivers of public utility vehicles such as jeepneys, buses, transport utility vans, minibuses, bus shuttle services, taxis, and motorcycle taxis, and drivers of delivery services, Malacanang announced on Friday, March 11. The second tranche will be released next month. Threatening a preemptive strike, swiftly responding to missile tests, telling rude boy leader Kim Jong-un to behave. South Korea's next president looks set to get tough on the nuclear-armed North, analysts say. For the last 5 years, Seoul has pursued a policy of engagement with Pyongyang, brokering high-level summits between Kim and then U.S. President Donald Trump, while reducing joint U.S. military drills the North sees as provocative. For President-elect Yoon Suk-yeol, who won a close election by a razor-thin margin Thursday, this subservient approach has been a manifest failure. The outgoing administration of President Moon Jae-in volunteered to play middleman between the U.S. and North Korea, but was dumped by both in the end, Yoon said in a pre-election Facebook post. Since the start of the year, Pyongyang has conducted a record-breaking 9 weapons tests, including a banned hypersonic and medium-range ballistic missiles. After the North test fired what it claimed was a reconnaissance satellite component Saturday, Seoul said it was a disguised ballistic missile. Yoon, 61, said the youthful Kim needed to be taken in hand.
지속 가능한 발전은 성장과 국민의 안전과 재산, 영토와 주권을 지키기 위해 어떠한 도발도 확실하게 억제할 수 있는 강력한 국방력을 구축하겠습니다. 북한의 불법적이고 불합리한 행동에 대해서는 원칙에 따라 단호하게 대처하되 남북 대화의 문은 언제든 열어둘 것입니다. 성장과 복지가
Tokyo stocks tumbled Friday on fears of a protracted conflict in Ukraine and as U.S. inflation data renewed concern over potential rate hikes. The benchmark Nikkei 225 index fell 2.05% or 527.62 points to 25,162.78, while the broader topics index gave up 1.64% or 30.49 points to 1,799.54. Shares had been tipped to fall apart or after the Nikkei surged nearly 4% on Thursday, followed by overnight falls of Wall Street shares, which weighed on the Tokyo market. The weakness of other Asian markets also helped to drive down the Tokyo bourse, analysts said. The situation in Ukraine and worries over the accelerating speed of U.S. inflation triggered sell-offs of a broad range of shares, according to Okasan Online Securities. The Nikkei's fall slowed down around the 25,000 point, where bargain hunting kicked in, the brokerage said. But investors were bracing themselves for further negative news on the weekend as the United States and European governments continue to intensify sanctions against Russia and major global businesses suspend Russian operations. Meanwhile, airlines and airports called Friday for an end to pandemic measures for European domestic flights as most countries in the region begin to relax requirements to present proof of vaccination and wearing of masks. COVID-19 and specifically the Omicron variant is now pervasive throughout all of Europe, and population immunity is at such levels that the risk of hospitalization or death has dramatically reduced, especially for vaccinated people, according to the joint statement from ASI Europe and IATA. ASI Europe, which represents some 500 airports in the region, plus IATA, the top trade association for airlines, noted that numerous countries were now dropping requirements to wear masks in public spaces or present proof of vaccination to enter social events. As European countries open up and remove restrictions, they said it is only logical to remove similar restrictions from air transport. Coming 2 years to the day from when the World Health Organization declared COVID-19 a global pandemic, the trade bodies called for an end to requirements to present negative COVID tests and submit locator forms, as well as wearing masks on flights between European countries which no longer require them, or which no longer require wearing them inside public places. This will free people to travel and support jobs returning to the European air transport and travel sectors, according to IATA's Regional Vice President for Europe in a statement. More news after this break.
Marami mang pagbabagong dala ang pandemya sa bansa, hindi naman nito na bago ang katatagan, pagsusumikap at diskarte ng mga Pilipino. For them, it's business as usual when it comes to developing and offering world-class products and services. In this episode, we will talk about the Philippine entertainment and advertising industry with Arnold Vega Fria, Chairman of ALV Group of companies. Listen to inspiring stories and tips on how small businesses can navigate the new normal as we feature outstanding business leaders and personalities at the Global Trends Business Leaders Awards 2022. All these in this episode of Open for Business.
Isasayaw kita, ika'y mahalaga para sa akin.
Hi guys, ako si JD at abangan nyo ako bilang isang guest performer sa Letters and Music itong darating na Sabado, March 12, 1 to 2 p.m. Siyempre, dito lamang sa Net 25. See you po!
Ani, ano ba? Yung anak natin, patahimikin mo na, patahanin mo.
Ayoko. Weird ng anak natin na yan. Hi, ako po yung nag-a-apply.
Marunong ka ba magluto?
Sana nga, maluto mo yung mga paborito namin pagkain.
Alam na namin ang sikreto niyong dalawa.
Oo nga! Bakit hawak mo yan? Couple's necklace na yan.
Binigay sa amin ni Esmigong yan.
Esmigong?
Welcome to Mobile Legends!
Ang morning show na always nagbibigay ng ngiti at saya sa bawat kada all over the world. Tara na't ma-inspire at ma-amaze sa kwento ng mga bawat kada na nagwagi sa anumang hamon at pagsubok ng buhay. Itago na mga remote control at tumambay lang dito sa paborito niyong barkada sa umaga, ang Kada Umaga! Dahil kayo ang bida dito.
Gusto niyo bang magkaroon ng tsansang manalo ng 5,000 pesos na nasa bahay lang kayo? Manood lang ng Tara Game agad-agad mula simula hanggang katapusan para makuha ang mga sagot sa dalawang Tara Game questions of the night. Magpunta lang sa www.net25.com, pindutin ang Tara Game Sagot Agad-Agad logo, mag-register at isubmit ang mga sagot mo para magkaroon ka ng entry. Ang dali lang. Natuwa ka na, posible ka pang manalo ng 5,000 pesos. Ang dali lang nito. O ano, sali na sa Tara Game Sagot Agad-Agad promo!
Maraming salamat po, kapatid na Eduardo B. Manalo.
Maraming salamat po sa kapatid na Eduardo B. Manalo.
Maraming salamat po, kapatid na Eduardo B. Manalo.
karamiwan na kami po'y hinahamak at tinataboy. Pero buong puso niyo kaming tinanggap at kinupkop. Kung dati, kung saan kami naninirahan, ngayon may permanente na kaming tirahan.
Maraming salamat sa kabuhayang pinagkaloob niyo. Hindi na po kami mangangamba sa aming kinabukasan.
Maraming salamat po sa pagbibigay ng edukasyon sa amin upang matupad na ang aming mga pangarap.
Mahal na mahal po namin kayo.
Welcome back. Over to Peru, 4 American crocodile hatchlings, an endangered species, are examined at a Lima zoo. The hatchlings were born in captivity in mid-January after 78 days of incubation from the eggs of a pair of adult crocodiles. A Lima zoo announced Thursday the birth in captivity of 4 American crocodiles, an endangered species, after a successful artificial incubation. The crocodile hatchlings were born in mid-January after 78 days of incubation from the eggs of a pair of adult crocodiles that live in the Huachipa Zoological Park east of Lima. Head of the zoo's reptile area, Jose Flores, told AFP that they have now shown these crocodile pups that were just born 45 days ago at the zoo. He stressed any birth of any species that is threatened and in danger of extinction must be considered an achievement. The hatchlings live in a special fish tank measuring 26 centimeters or 10.2 inches and weigh between 70 and 90 grams or 0.15 to 0.19 pounds each. They have the traditional olive green color of the species and protruding eyes. They feed on small pieces of chicken and fish. In Peru, they are known as Tumbes crocodiles because their natural habitat is the mangroves of Tumbes on the border of Ecuador. At 195 kilograms, the father crocodile is 5 meters long, while the mother is 2.5 meters long and weighs 85 kilograms, and they are both 20 years old. 11 years after a devastating tsunami hit Japan's northeast, thousands of workers at the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear plant are involved in the complex and decades-long decommissioning of the site. Take a look.
アルプス処理水安全なものだというふうに我々考えておりますけども、これは国際基準にですね準拠した我が国日本の基準にしっかり準拠した水になるようにですねしっかり処理をしたり希釈をしたりということになります。でやはりそういった処理水安全だということをですねご理解いただくようなことが必要かと思いますので。
Hold on.
Ukrainian refugee Katarina fled Kiev for the Polish border with her family and 2 Pomeranian dogs, saying they decided to take them because they cannot live without them. She is one of many Ukrainians carrying cats, dogs, turtles, and other pets as they flee Russia's invasion. Take a look.
This is Plusha. She's a woman and she's 8 years old, and she has never been abroad before. But the war in my country made her move here together with me. With my family, we have 2 dogs. There is a girl and a boy. Her name is Ursa, and his name is Balu. They are 9 months old, so they are like puppies, and we love them very much, and we decided to take them with us because we can't live without them.
More news when Eagle News International returns.
Catch us on Letters and Music on air and online this March 12th from 1 to 2 p.m. Only here in Net 25. See ya!
Alam na namin ang sikreto niyong dalawa.
Oo nga! Bakit hawak mo yung couple's necklace na yan? Binigay sa amin ni Esmigong yan! Esmigong?
Ako po yung nag-a-apply.
Marunong ka ba magluto?
Sana nga, maluto mo yung mga paborito namin pagkain.
Ito ang mechanics ng ating game. Bawat contestant iikot ng 8 beses, kukuha ng 3 bola, at isushoot kung sino pinakamaraming ma-shoot sila ang winner.
Araw-araw may bagong kaalaman. Dahil sa Tony Knows, everybody knows! Your Kuya Tony Petgaba na hindi naubusan ng tips. Siyempre, from DIY to life hacks, sagot ko na yan. Saan ka pa? Let's all play together. Let's have fun together. Tara na, sumali at makigulo sa aming Kada Challenge. Sa kada umaga, kompleto na ang inyong umaga.
Panoorin ang mga bentang-bentang hirit ng mga tara-gamers nating tindero at tindera. Anong kulay ang asin dati, 25 years ago?
Brown.
Magkano itong isda nyo? Yan ba isda nyo, fresh ba
lang,
yan?
parehas ang timbangan. Parehas na parehas, parang ang tindera lang.
Ngayong linggo sa Tara Game! Agad! Alas 7 ng gabi sa Net 25.
Abangan ang mga istorya ng pagbangon sa Season 2 ng Lingap Stories tuwing linggo, alas 5 ng hapon sa Net 25.
Welcome back. Over to NASA, the Apollo missions to the moon up so that it can be studied by different scientific teams. We'll return after this break.
Aquino here at Hatley Castle, one of the filming locations for the X-Men series. Don't forget to tune in to Digital Nest only on Net 25.
Marami mang pagbabagong dala ang pandemya sa bansa, hindi naman nito na bago ang katatagan, pagsusumikap at diskarte ng mga Pilipino. For them, it's business as usual when it comes to developing and offering world-class products and services. In this episode, we will talk about the Philippine entertainment and advertising industry with Arnold Vegafria, chairman of ALV Group of Companies. Listen to inspiring stories and tips on how small businesses can navigate the new normal as we feature outstanding business leaders and personalities at the Global Trends Business Leaders Awards 2022. All these in this episode of Open for Business.
Welcome back. Over to NASA, the Apollo missions to the moon brought a total of 2,196 rock samples to Earth. But NASA has only just started opening one of the last ones collected 50 years ago. For all that time, some tubes were kept sealed so that they could be studied years later with the help of the latest technical breakthroughs. In a statement, Director of the Planetary Science Division at NASA headquarters, Lori Glaze, said NASA knew science and technology would evolve and allow scientists to study the material in new ways to address new questions in the future. Dubbed 73001, the sample in question was collected by astronauts Eugene Cernan and Harrison Schmitt in December 1972 during the Apollo 17 mission, the last of the program. The tube, 35 centimeters long and 4 centimeters wide, had been hammered into the ground of the moon's Taurus Littrow Valley to collect the rocks. Of the only 2 samples that have been been vacuum sealed on the moon, this is the first to be opened. It could, as such, contain gases or volatile substances like water and carbon dioxide. And the aim is to extract these gases, which are probably only present in very small quantities, to be able to analyze them using spectrometry techniques that have become extremely precise in recent years. In early February, the outer protective tube was first removed. It was not itself revealed to contain any lunar gas, indicating that the sample it contained remained sealed. Then, on February 23, scientists began a weeks-long process aimed at piercing the main tube and harvesting the gas contained inside. In the spring, the rock will then be carefully extracted and broken up so that it can be studied by different scientific teams. And that it's for tonight's broadcast. As always, we'll end the day on a thoughtful note. Our ability to look back and smile at our past is proof that God's and life's plan is to keep us moving forward. This has been Eagle News International, and I'm Maricar Velasco. We live in interesting times.